Dave and Mary Neese had a great relationship with their daughter Skylar. She was their only child, and they were very protective of her. The three shared an apartment in Star City, West Virginia, and lived a rather ordinary American lifestyle. Skylar was an honor student at her high school, worked at a fast food restaurant part-time, and hoped to become a criminal lawyer someday. For the most part, she stayed out of trouble and followed her parents' rules. But like most teens, she sometimes longed for more freedom than her mother and father allowed, especially since some of her friends came from less strict homes. One night in July 2012, Skylar snuck out past her curfew to go hang out with her best friends, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf. A surveillance camera captured footage of Skylar getting into Sheila's car after she slipped out of her bedroom window, but she never returned home. The next day, Dave Neese found a step stool on the ground outside his daughter's bedroom, and he noticed that the screen had been removed from Skylar's window. After trying to call her multiple times and failing to reach her, Dave began to panic. Mary Neese, who initially assumed her daughter was with friends, also started to worry. When Skylar failed to show up at her job, the couple knew something was terribly wrong. They called 911 and began hanging flyers around town in hopes that members of the public would be able to help find her. The police initially considered Skylar a runaway, but they began to treat her disappearance as a missing persons case after learning that her phone charger and other personal belongings that no teenage runaway would leave behind were found in her bedroom. Skylar also hadn't used any of her bank cards, further pointing detectives away from the theory that she ran away. At that point, Skylar's parents knew that she had left the night before, but they didn't know who she went with or where she went. Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf admitted to the Neeses and to the police that Skylar had snuck out late at night to spend time with them. They claimed that they drove around, smoked some weed together, and that they dropped Skylar off down the street from her apartment building to avoid waking her parents up. The explanation seemed believable, and Eddy and Schoaf seemed genuinely worried about their missing friend. They visited Skylar's parents, cried with them, attended a vigil, and helped look for her. In the meantime, gossip began to spread about what supposedly happened to Skylar. One story claimed that she had fatally overdosed on drugs at a party, and that the people there disposed of her body because they were worried that they would be accused of foul play if they contacted the police. Other rumors alleged that Skylar had split town on her own free will, and that she might have even left the country. Skylar wasn't known to use hard drugs, so the overdose story seemed like just that, a story, and nothing more. And by that point, detectives were thoroughly convinced that Skylar hadn't disappeared on purpose, much less left the country. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement noticed that Eddy and Schoaf weren't acting quite right. Around the same time, inconsistencies began to pop up in the girls' stories and timelines about the night Skylar vanished. According to the pair, they picked Skylar up at around 11 p.m. and dropped her back off before midnight. But the apartment building's surveillance footage showed her leaving and getting into a car at 12:35 a.m. 2 months after Skylar went missing, the FBI got involved in the case. They interviewed her classmates and everyone in her social circle, and began to dial up the pressure on Schoaf and Eddy. Federal agents and local authorities repeatedly interviewed the young women, making it clear that they weren't going to just go away or interrupt their extracurriculars to take them in for more questioning. During a Dateline interview, one of Skylar's other friends, who wasn't a suspect, told reporter Andrea Canning that FBI agents had asked him if Schoaf and Eddy had been acting different since the disappearance. He said that the two didn't necessarily seem different, but that they were keeping to themselves more than they used to. Other students told law enforcement that they had heard a rumor that Schoaf and Eddy were plotting to murder Skylar before she disappeared, but nobody took it seriously enough to report it. For a while, Dave and Mary Neese thought investigators were wasting their time by focusing on Schoaf and Eddy. They couldn't fathom the idea of their daughter's best friends doing something terrible to her, and then pretending to be devastated while comforting the family. The nieces even asked the police to leave the girls alone. But that wasn't going to happen. Detectives' suspicions were growing stronger by the day, and they were convinced that pursuing Shoaff and Eddy would help them to get to the bottom of the case. Corporal Ronnie Gaskins, who interviewed the girls multiple times, noticed that Sheila Eddy acted perfectly calm and collected, while Rachel Shoaff seemed distracted and nervous. By then, both teens were telling the exact same story, right down to the smallest details, and they did not waver from the narrative even slightly. But no matter how suspiciously well the two stuck to their story, there was nothing they could do to stop the evidence from stacking up against them. Surveillance footage from a convenience store revealed that the girls were traveling in the opposite direction than they claimed they had driven on the night of Skylar's disappearance. Cell phone records confirmed that instead of going east like they told detectives, they had gone west. At that point, Skylar's parents became convinced that Shoaff and Eddy knew more than they were telling, and they implored the girls to talk. Determined to find out what happened to her daughter, Mary Neese began publicly calling out the young women on social media, letting them and the rest of the world know that if they did something to Skylar, they weren't going to get away with it. Meanwhile, detectives discovered hostile correspondence between Skylar, Shoaff, and Eddy on Twitter and Facebook. The day before Skylar went missing, she had complained about her friends excluding her from hanging out with them. Similar complaints appeared in a series of tweets Skylar had posted about a month earlier, calling one of the girls two-faced and stupid. When confronted about these issues, Sheila Eddy continued to stand by her claim that she had nothing to do with Skylar's disappearance. But Rachel Shoaff slowly began to crack under the pressure, and she eventually caved and admitted to police that they had lied about where they went that night. Sheila made identical changes to her story the next day. As the walls began to close in on the suspects, Rachel's behavior became increasingly erratic, and she began having problems at home. In December of 2012, 5 months after Skylar vanished, Rachel's mother, Patricia, dialed 911 and told the dispatcher that she couldn't deal with her out-of-control daughter. She claimed that Rachel was hitting and screaming at her family and running wild through their neighborhood. In the background, the 911 dispatcher could hear Rachel ordering her mother to give her the phone and shrieking at the top of her lungs. Patricia told the operator that her husband was trying to restrain Rachel and said to please hurry to the scene. After spending a few days in a mental health facility, Rachel requested to meet with law enforcement at her lawyer's office. At the beginning of the meeting, Corporal Gaskins asked her if Skylar had accidentally overdosed, and Rachel blurted out, "We stabbed her." According to Rachel, she and Sheila had planned the murder more than a month in advance. They came up with the idea of killing Skylar one day during science class and began hashing out the details. In the meantime, they carried on their friendship with Skylar, and she remained oblivious to their sinister plot. On the night of the murder, Sheila brought 2 knives to kill Skylar with, and Rachel brought a shovel for digging her grave. They packed some extra clothes and cleaning supplies and hit the road. Skylar thought they were just going to hang out like normal, even though there had been recent tensions among the friends. She apparently didn't question why Sheila and Rachel were wearing hoodies on a stifling hot summer night, and was completely unaware that they were concealing the murder weapons in their shirts. After nearly an hour of driving, they arrived at a remote wooded area where Skylar believed they were going to smoke pot. After getting out of the car, Rachel said to Sheila, "On 3." She counted to 3, and they viciously attacked Skylar from behind with the kitchen knives. Skylar fought for her life and even managed to briefly get away from her attackers. But they caught up with her and stabbed her in the knee, making it impossible for her to run away. Shoaff and Eddy proceeded to stab Skylar dozens of times. As she lay dying, she asked them why. It was the same question authorities had for the young women, to which Rachel coldly and matter-of-factly answered, "We didn't like her." When Corporal Gaskins asked her to go into more detail about why they didn't like Skylar, she replied, "Oh, nothing. We just didn't like her." Several people had become concerned about Skylar's growing friendship with Rachel and Sheila in the time leading up to her murder. The three had become inseparable, and Skylar's personality had started to change. Once known for being sweet and bubbly, she lost some of that niceness. And it seemed as if Sheila's sour personality was rubbing off on her. In the months before she was killed, it became clear to people that the trio had a toxic dynamic. When Skylar wasn't around, her so-called friends said horrifically mean things about her. They talked about how they couldn't stand her, and on one occasion, Sheila allegedly told a friend, "I wouldn't care if she died." During her confession interview, Rachel said that she wanted to get the murder done and out of the way before she left for church summer camp, as if it were a simple chore to check off on her to-do list. Rachel and Sheila tried digging a hole to bury Skylar in, but had a tougher time than they expected. So they covered her body with branches and left the scene. In early 2013, Rachel led law enforcement to the murder scene. There was snow on the ground, and investigators were initially unable to find Skylar's remains. They returned to the site a week later and found her heavily decomposed body. It took 2 months for the medical examiner to confirm the identity of the remains. In addition to Rachel's confession and the recovery of Skylar's body, authorities connected the accused teens to the crime through DNA evidence found in Sheila's car. Authorities charged the pair with kidnapping and murder. During the court proceedings, David Neese urged the judge not to be lenient. He said, and they're both exactly where they need to be, away from civilization, locked up like animals. Sheila Eddy pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. In what's known as a life with mercy sentence, was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 15 years. She expressed no remorse whatsoever for the crime, and still hasn't to this day. Rachel Shoaf was convicted of second-degree murder and received a 30-year sentence with a possibility of parole after 10 years. She apologized for killing Skylar during her sentencing hearing, but the Neeses didn't believe for a second that she was truly remorseful for her actions. After the hearing, David Neese told the press that Shoaf wasn't sorry. She was just sorry she got caught. Her first parole hearing is scheduled for May 9th, 2023. The Neeses have spoken out against Shoaf's possible release, saying that they don't believe she deserves the second chance at life that their brutally slain daughter will never have. A lot of people have gotten behind the family and are hoping that Rachel's parole is denied at her upcoming hearing. Skylar was killed more than a decade ago, but the shockingly brutal nature of the murder has kept it in the headlines on a fairly regular basis in the years since. It was a gruesome crime, but people also struggle to understand the motive. There were clearly tensions and trust issues between Skylar and her friends, but it was nothing that a sane, rational person would kill someone over. Sadly, Sheila and Rachel could have simply ended their friendship with Skylar. They could have gone their separate ways and carried on with their lives. But because of their senseless and evil decision to kill their former friend, one life was lost and several others were ruined. Instead of pursuing careers, marrying, having families, or achieving any of the other milestones people get to enjoy in the free world, Rachel and Sheila made cruel and reckless choices that landed them behind bars with uncertain futures. Life will certainly never be the same for David and Mary Neese, who once considered Skylar's friends to be like second and third daughters. They've suffered through pain that they would never wish on anyone else. In addition to fighting for justice for their daughter in criminal court, they campaigned for a new law that would require authorities to issue an Amber Alert for all missing children. No Amber Alert was ever issued in Skylar's case because law enforcement didn't think she had been abducted or was necessarily in serious danger. And an Amber Alert wouldn't have saved Skylar's life, since she was already dead by the time her family realized she was missing. But the Neeses believed that lives could be saved if certain missing persons cases that are often overlooked were treated with more urgency. Under Skylar's law, Amber Alerts would be issued in West Virginia even in cases when a child is thought to be a runaway, and in the absence of any evidence that they're in imminent danger or serious injury or death. The bill received widespread support and was signed into law in May 2013, less than a year after the murder. Thanks for watching. Would you rather find out that someone you thought of as a friend had tried to put a hit out on you because they were secretly jealous of you to the point of hating you? Or find out that a close friend was responsible for a series of burglaries that had occurred at your home? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.